We can head into another discussion because the adoption of machine learning and artificial intelligence in finance has really accelerated with the rise of generative AI. So especially during the last year. So what is already possible and what is yet to come? I'm looking forward to the discussion with the following panelists. The co-founder of and CEO of Merantix, I think you all know this, Adrian Locher, the CEO at Bank, Ali Niknam, and the co-founder and CEO of Tactile, Maik Taro Wehmeyer. Please join me on stage. Hi. There's so much walking going on here. Feel free to choose your seat. Thank you all for being here. Let's dive into the discussion. Adrian, as an entrepreneur and investor with experience from over 20 years, how did Gen AI create actually new possibilities for fintech, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. That is a pretty open-ended question. So maybe first of all, to start, find a kind of a decision of what Gen AI is and what is not, and also what makes it different from all the AI before. So in generally, I would say, first of all, there is no difference because it's all machine learning. It's just machine learning is evolving with more capabilities, some scientific breakthroughs, much more processing power, but also much more data. And then also new methodologies that you use to train these networks, using reinforcement learning as an example, where you continuously use the feedback of users to make your models much, much better. But in general, if you want, the past 10 years in AI have been largely decided by, okay, what AI is really good at, or machine learning is really good at, is pattern recognition and coming up with decision-making based on these patterns. And now with the new generation of machine learning that we're currently looking at, and we call it Gen AI, AI starts to think and create. So this is a major difference, because if you think about the pattern recognition and analytics, it's a small part of what we do in our daily lives. But when you think about thinking and creating, it's actually, I would call it the other 99%. So we're looking at potentially much, much larger markets, much, much larger companies that can now be created based on this technology. And not just in the fintech field, but in all fields that humans currently have still the upper hand.
Yes, okay, definitely. Mike, the integration of AI and payments, and particularly actually of Gen AI, of course, marks a notable shift towards increased productivity and also cost efficiency. Your automated platform actually helps fintech harness data. I think this is key. Oh, now we are. Sorry for this.
Good morning.
Coming back to. So, Mike, in your words, how did Gen AI actually empower you?
Yes, well, thank you. And maybe picking up on what Adrian said in terms of what Gen AI can do in fintech. So the first applications people normally talk about is credit and fraud, lending. And I think important to understand there is that these LLM models are trained on the internet, on public data. So they have not seen default data, credit data. Like, I don't think Bank gives their default data to the internet. So it's like, you cannot do everything that you think you can do or want to with LLMs. I think what they're really, really strong at is not the final risk decision or fraud decision or payment decision, but they're really good at creating new content, like net new content. They're really, really good at taking unstructured data, banking data, PDFs into structured data, which then you can feed into more traditional AI models that, ML models that Adrian was talking about. So the differentiation between taking LLMs to create new data and then using them with traditional models that are more interpretable from a regulatory perspective is where we see the majority of power coming from this new technology.
And talking about your idea actually and your approach. So what was the process? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So when we founded the company, it was a pure AI ML company, and we thought, well, AI is going to rule the world from now on. But after a couple of months selling, it was pretty clear that not every decision is actually being made by AI, but it's still embedded into very classical business rules. So we actually then expanded our platform to a more decisioning use case where you can have AI models, but most non-technical people in credit, for example, they just want to set rules around the new fancy AI models. And you need to combine both into one platform to actually run important decisions nowadays if you are fintech, if you are a bank.
Yeah, definitely. Ali, your neobank bank is a success story, definitely, and your bank focuses on the power of AI to make banking also safer and more efficient. So, in your words, how is AI fueling your company?
Thank you. Thank you for a great question. Thank you for having me here. Now, both Mike and Adrian did an excellent job describing the technical aspects of AI. But I think at Bank we're really great at making life easy for our users. And making life easy means making an intuitive user interface. Part of that intuitive user interface is natural language. The way we are conversing with each other right now is natural language, not through rules, not through statistics, not through buttons, but natural language. And the fast pace in technological advancement in AI makes that we can embed that in the experience in your day-to-day finance to make life even easier for our users. I think that's first and foremost one of the most important aspects where we use AI today for at Bank. So we launched Fin. This is a bot that helps you with your everyday finance last December. This was a world first. You can ask really cool questions to it. So like 3 days ago, I couldn't remember whether I had whether I had paid my taxes yet. So I thought, hey, let's see if Fin can help me with this, because for us, it's an evolving technology as well. We don't really know what it can and can't do. And so I asked, hey, Fin, have I paid my taxes yet? And it was actually a correct answer. It understood what I meant. It understood that I live in Amsterdam. It checked my city taxes. But it also checked my country taxes of the Netherlands, and it gave me a correct answer, and it showed me the right payments. So for us, being able to do that, being able to make life easy for our users so that they can work intuitively throughout their lives without having to do all of this mental exercise is the most important thing. And obviously, I mean, we're very proficient technically at Bank, so we have had a lot of machine learning models keeping our users safe. It is true that our data is obviously very private, but we have sufficient data to train these ML models ourselves. We're a very modern tech company, so we don't need to have those decision trees. We have a lot of people who actually understand this technology and can leverage it to its full extent. But first and foremost, we live by our users and to make their lives easy, and so we use all of the technologies, including AI, to make that happen.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. This is a discussion. So
What is the perception of the users of talking to an AI agent rather than talking to a human? Do they care? Or are they actually happy because it's faster?
That is a great question. So they think they care, but they don't always know whether they're talking to a human or a bot. So about 30% of all our support questions, and mind you, the example that I just gave with the bot, that is clear that it's like an assistant. So it's clear you're talking to a machine. But specifically, when people are talking to support, they don't really know whether they're talking to a bot or... So 30% is fully answered to satisfaction by an AI bot. An additional 30% is answered by a human, but with co-pilot or help of an AI assistant. And only 40% is now fully manual. And we look forward to probably reducing that to about 5 to 10% by the end of the year.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking about the potential of AI, 3 years ago, Bank had problems with increasing phishing attacks and online fraud. What did you learn from that experience, and how do you rate your current security measures?
Well, I think it's not just Bank that's having those issues.
Yeah,
I
for
think it's an entire sector, and the safety of you, of our users, of money is always #1 priority at Bank, and so we always employ the latest technologies to keep everybody safe. We use AI in transaction monitoring to make sure that the transactions you make are as safe as possible. But we also employ AI in actually behavior analysis, so that if you employ weird behavior, we get a warning signal like, hey, something may be up with this user. So it's really employing all of the latest technologies to keep people safe. Unfortunately, especially during and post-COVID, as everything became more digital, not everybody was as adept in online and digital, and so spoofing, phishing, scamming online has become a huge issue, I think, for banks, for trade platforms like eBay, basically anything that's online. And we believe at Bank that through cooperation, we can help people stay safe. Part of it is informing them, because ultimately, if people know, hey, this is a scam, they're safe. And a part of it is companies doing the most that they can, using the latest technologies to make sure that everybody's safe.
Cooperation, I think, is a very important keyword. And then you can react to it, but please, then go ahead. Can you give an example of how you, this helped with an issue, or what are you?
Yeah, that's a great example. So one of the things that we're doing in the Netherlands is banks there, and I'm sure other countries are doing this too, but banks there are working together to discuss fraud patterns. I think that's a great example. Another example is specifically we have a second-hand, like a Craigslist or an eBay in the Netherlands called Marktplaats.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fraud in there too. People saying, hey, you can buy the latest iPhone for 300 euros, and then, they never actually deliver. We try to work together with Marktplaats to see, which people are offering what. Obviously, we're also bound by privacy laws, so we cannot access all of the data, which makes life a little bit more difficult sometimes. But within the bounds that we are allowed to, we do our utmost by partnering and combining knowledge to keep users safe.
Adrian, which power lies in cooperation? Do you have
Well,
an example?
I think all the companies we form, build, or also invest in as an investor, they rely on building proprietary models, which usually requires proprietary data. And so collaborations and building groups or of collaborators is usually one of the first initial steps when we get started. So to give you an example from a different industry than fintech, when we talk about healthcare, one of our companies is in breast cancer screening. It was one of our earliest companies that we helped to form. And what we did first there was building a consortium of 15 different players, be that university hospitals, teleradiologies, and small radiology chains, to help gathering the initial set of data that would then be used to train the first models. And only because you have such a diverse group with also diverse data of different stages of the same people also, you can then build strong and reliable models. So collaboration in our field is absolutely key.
Actually, you are bringing people together, as you just explained, who are looking for AI solutions, for example. And I would like to talk a little more about the potential on cybersecurity and also fraud detection we already talked about. Data already shows the remarkable capabilities of AI in this regard. But in your opinion, how good is generative AI in outsmarting cyber criminals really, in your opinion?
Well, I would argue, as with every general purpose technology, this goes usually both ways, because the technology itself is neutral. It can be used in both good and bad ways. So the people fighting crime and the people committing crime are usually having access to the kind of similar resources. And so it's this classical arms race that we also see. And it's funny enough, because we are right now looking into a few cyber security investments and are also thinking about building a company in that space. And one of the baffling numbers to me is that 9 out of 10 cyber security breaches or incidents happen through what we call the human layer. So yeah, you can spend billions in building technical protection, but if you do not train and help your people to defend themselves, they're usually the easiest and lowest entry barrier point to enter in a system. And so most cyber criminals are also have an economical thinking. So they are looking for the easiest way in. And if that easiest way usually is the human, then we need to actually help develop tools and methods to train people to become less attacked or less easy to click on something. But of course, with the capabilities rising in Gen AI, it also becomes much, much easier to create these kind of attacks. And we've just done a simulation in our own company with the company that we hired for this, and it was striking to see how many people clicked on these links, despite given our backgrounds in this field, right?
Yeah, really. Would anyone like to react, or I would?
Well, this is definitely the case, right? The human is always the weakest link because, and that's also what we see. I think about 6 months ago, somebody made a deep fake of me during a live video call, and I asked someone to transfer a couple of million euros to some bank account because supposedly we were buying a company. And fortunately, that person followed the right processes and asked like, hey, but you're asking this through WhatsApp, but you should really use our internal channel. And that's how it was caught. But it's really fascinating how easy it is. I mean, if I would have a Zoom call now with you, how do I really know it's you?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe just to, find a code word or gesture in advance or something. Yeah, we will find ways, I think, creative ways.
We will find ways, but I think, so one of the interesting things is, I think we have talked a lot about the technology, but I think in general, if we take a step back and look back in time, I think we are at the very, very early stages of AI today. We've all seen in the movies these really big computers, you know, these mainframes in the 1960s, and everybody's like, oh, computers are coming, but what will they do? And now computers, you know, are obviously empowering our day-to-day lives. It is my belief that the same will happen with AI. If you look at how inefficient most algorithms today are, how much power they use. But despite that inefficiency, they already provide a lot of value. Now, if you see the pace at which the technology is improving, I don't think many people can perceive how big of an advancement this will be in the next 2-3 years. And with that will come all kinds of new challenges, such as us not knowing digitally whether we're the same. And I think there will be a paradox in that, because the easier the online world becomes, I think ultimately the closer people will get back together in real life again. Because the only way to know that it's you is by seeing you in person. And I think there's something romantic to that.
Something romantic there for sure. But also people in power, of course, are starting to more and more think about AI. So to add a different perspective in this discussion, you know, regarding regulation and how AI is discussed at the political level, Maik, you are serving as a member of the EU Commission's AI Alliance and also the German AI Alliance. Can you give us an example of how topics like the potential but also risk of AI, especially in finance, are dealt with in Brussels? How satisfying or frustrating is it?
Would love to. I think it actually all started like Adrian's company Merantix and Tecta were both like one of the founding members of the German AI Association, so the Bundesverband for KI, in I think like 2016, 2017, because it was like the early days of AI and no one knew what we actually are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do. So people normally perceive regulation as being something really bad, which I actually don't agree with. Like if you trying to build a new technology and no one tells you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, no one actually buys them because Commerzbank or Deutsche Bank or ABN AMRO, they're super scared to adopt the technology where they don't know what the regulator will say. So we started that initiative early on. Now with the AI Act by European Commission, which got released a couple months ago, I think it's pretty clear what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And it's actually a lot. So we as Tactile are really, really happy about the trajectory that which is actually the whole thing is going. You just need to know what you're doing, what explainability actually is. And if you have like that data available and you can show it to the regulator, you're actually in good shape. So it's not a bad thing. And we are there, again, also a step ahead of the United States. So Tactile, many of our customers are in the US. And there, it's like the Wild West, like it's been for a long time. But in the European Union, we know actually which direction we want to take.
Adrian, what is your opinion on the AI Act?
No, in general, I am completely aligned with what Mike just said. So regulation per se is a good thing, and it's also important to be at the forefront and to be quick. I think with the AI Act, two things I would have wished differently is one, maybe starting with the amount of bureaucracy it creates. That is quite baffling, and obviously there is a big issue with you being a small company having to align with all these regulations, which is producing a lot of material, producing a lot of reporting, which is essentially much easier for big companies who have their teams for that versus the small companies that are just being built. And I'm just giving a very concrete example also how this creates inefficiencies. Again, using the example of our healthcare company that I mentioned before. So before the AI Act, they had to comply with GDPR and they had to comply with MDR, which is the medical device regulation. GDPR, obviously, is the data privacy regulation. And they had to maintain these two regulatory bodies. And now we have a third body coming to it. And a lot of things are also kind of parallel or double. So there's lots of redundancies, lots of things that you need to report for the GDPR, you need to report for the MDR, and now you also need to report for the AI Act. So it just creates much more bureaucracy. So that's one thing I would have wished for a little bit lighter outcome. And then maybe that's a debatable thing, but the way the AI Act looks at technology is actually, hey, let's regulate the technology. I would have wished for an approach where you say, hey, let's regulate the application.
Okay, interesting. One follow-up there. Mike, to come back to now, like finding business solution that fits for your purposes and your company. Of course, every software always have to be proven safe and functionally correct. I think this is key. How do you make sure that an AI-driven software is really ready?
Yeah, it's a big question. Probably the first question that comes up when we go to a bank and they ask us, okay, so you've built that technology, how can we make sure it's not only correct, but it's also ethically correct, which is two different things. Like you can be really precise in your predictions and your outcomes, but you may be too precise on a group of minorities, on a zip code that you actually don't want to discriminate against. There are by now a lot of kind of like helping functions to do that. So you're not blind. You can make things more explainable, but then in the end, the question is not, is it possible from a tech perspective, but what do you consider to be fair and just, which is more like a philosophical question in the end, and not a question from a tech perspective. So the CEO of the bank needs to tell me on what is the maximum amount of discrimination that they actually want to allow, and then I can calibrate for that. But I cannot make that decision as kind of like building that algorithm. So it's possible by now, but there's not one right answer on what you should be doing.
Yeah. Ali, what should you be doing, or what can you tell us about your experiences?
Well, I think nothing is error-free, right? We have recently seen what Boeing is doing with their airplanes. A fault-free, 100% safe society doesn't exist. And I think one of the issues we have been having in Europe the last several years is that we have fallen prone to the fantasy that it may exist, and therefore every time a mistake happens, we regulate. I think we're in a very over-regulated environment right now. I think Europe is stifling its innovation. We have the brightest minds here. We have the best companies of the world here. But nobody can win a marathon with having a backpack full of rocks on their back. And I think if we stop a second, zoom out and look ahead and see what we need for the next 10, 20, 30 years with an aging population, with climate change coming up, I think we need to embrace innovation and find ways how we can develop more innovation in a safe way. Not in a fault-free way, but in a safe way. It's not the same thing. And that's also my answer to your question. At Bank, we have been using AI ever since we started, which is the reason why we're so both good at it as well as quick to adopt. All of our data patterns and storage is well prepped for AI. And we look at it from a statistical standpoint. So very simply, we allow a certain margin for false positives and false negatives. And as long as the system operates within those parameters, it's fine with us. It is impossible to prevent bias. It is impossible to declare the truth on ethical knowledge because morale and ethics change over time. What we deem ethical 30 years ago, we don't deem ethical today. And what we deem ethical today, we probably will not deem ethical 30 years from now. So at Bank, we try to be as unbiased and mathematical as we can.
To end with some inspiration, I think a lot of people here are looking for that. 23 Bank actually made profit for the first time.
Yes,
and
very happy over that.
increased interest rates are only one of the reasons, of course, why you are doing so well. But what advice do you have for other and even non-unicorns, but maybe soon to be, in regard of funding in this market situation?
In regards to funding, well, I think I have an advice for most founders, which is don't forget to enjoy the ride. Whether it goes up, it goes down, you're doing something very special, and you're very lucky to be in that position. Whatever happens, make sure you enjoy the most you can.
Okay, keeping up the good vibes. What inspirational?
For me, it's just like really important to mention about the whole AI discussion that we are not behind in Germany or in Europe. Like a lot of people feel really shy in terms of what OpenAI is doing, but we have really, really great people building great technology in Europe, and some of the biggest software companies actually also selling in the US.
I fully agree. Europe has the brightest minds. We're just messing things up by not having a single European Union and by embracing innovation.
No, that's
we
true.
think of all the great stuff and then we sell it to the US and they make the profit.
Exactly, and like we run that. We even like founded the company in Germany, and now I moved to New York, and we run the company from New York. Like there's no gap. There's no gap. It's just perception. So I'm really important for me to say that. We're on great track here, just we should believe in it a bit more than we normally do in the newspapers.
Adrian, you have one sentence to say something inspirational.
Dare more, take bigger risks. And maybe for the founders also, being laser focused on creating value for your customer that you picked, and the rest will follow.
Okay. If any of you feel inspired already or just got some question in your head, at the Späti at the end of this hall, you can keep on talking with these three gentlemen. Thank you so much for your inspiration and ideas.